Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Chatting Category Romances. This is a channel that I'm doing with Sarah at the Bookish Knitter, where we talk about category romances exclusively, which you will probably synonymize with Harlequin romance. They are little books, fairly programmatic, that are along certain regular lines that come out every month. So there'll be a line that will be racier, will have more explicitly sexual contact. There'll be a line that will have an older and traditional approach. There'll be a line of historicals. There'll be a line maybe once upon a time with supernatural elements. There'll be a line with thriller-esque elements, a serial killer or violence and gunplay, things like that, depending on what you want, depending on the kind of subgenre of fiction that you like. As Sarah has often said, no matter what kind of fiction that you like, there's a kind of romance that will work for it. And one of the lines is heartwarming. It's love-inspired. This is my Western for today. Healing the Cowboy's Heart. This is by Ruth Logan Hearn, and it's part of the love-inspired line, which I've read very few of these, but the impression that I get, Sarah could know. Sarah is the expert here on all of these things. She's talked to the editors and the publishers and knows all the authors. But the impression I get from Love Inspired, which you can gather from the series name, is an overlay of Christianity, an overlay of faith, which will mean a number of things. It probably will mean that there won't be any of the explicit violence that happens in the Harlequin intrigue or the Harlequin suspense. It probably also means that these will be sexually clean books, that there'll be flirtation, kissing, but there won't be anything else like that. There are, and have been in the past, Harlequin imprints where you're getting a Grey's Anatomy lesson by page 3. That won't happen in Love Inspired. And this is from 2019. I can't imagine what attracted me to it to pick a backlist title, but it ended up in my possession. And this is a story of Charlotte Fitzgerald, who goes by Char or Char. I don't know how the characters would actually pronounce it, but she is a big animal vet. Got an expensive education from her father, who was a sot, who she didn't like at all. They gave her a good education, and she has left the big city for Idaho, for the open farms and ranches of Idaho, looking to start a practice and really to start a new life. So a very standard romance type thing. And she is no sooner boots down in this town than she encounters a group of sick horses. And there is already an established big animal vet in town. And he doesn't really like a newcomer. Not only because she would cut into his business, but also there's a bit of reverse snobbery there. He's pretty defensive about her degree once he learns about it. He's pretty defensive about that. She doesn't care. We get the sense right away from her, really good sense right away, that she cares about the practicalities. She wants to set up a new business. She wants customers, so she doesn't want to alienate everybody. But also the animals. She really cares about these horses. One of whom, in particular, Ginger Snap, Ginger, is in much worse shape than the others, much older and much more abused. And while she is tending to these horses and fending off the kind of passive-aggressive comments being made by the older vet, some of which derive from the fact that the Fitzgeralds have a long history. She didn't pick Idaho out at random. Her family has a long history here. While that's all happening, a horse rancher shows up, Isaiah Woods. We're told that he is crazy good looking, that he's tall, straight, has a little bit longer black hair. The narration tells us that probably he has First Nation blood in him. And the narrative is a little unclear about that. This was 2019, so the term was still Native American. I think, you already know. If you watch my own channel, you already know that I have very little patience with politically correct word games as they have proliferated since 2016. I have very little patience with that at all. I think if you're really bothered by that sort of thing, you've got way too thin a skin to be outside of the nursery. But that having been said, the fashion now is First Nations, to call Aboriginal inhabitants of the United States First Nations people. And I would ordinarily object, but that's a hell of a cool name, so I don't care. So I'll use it. I'll be happy to use it. If these far left Twitter scolds if their new terminologies were all that cool, then I would use them all. Anyway, in this book, that wasn't in usage yet, so he's called Native American, and the narrative is a little unclear. Sometimes it seems like he has some Native American blood in him. Other times it says that he is Native American. But he shows up and is introduced as a sultry dreamboat. A little bit odd. Ordinarily, there's a little bit more coordination between the art department at Harlequin and the editor of the book, because that is a boy. There is a boy on the cover of this book. Not the character of Isaiah Woods is what I'm trying to say. He might be drop dead gorgeous, but he's 5 or 6 years older than this kid at least. But doesn't matter. It's in this particular case a lapse that I'm willing to live with. He shows up, and he doesn't care about the squabbles. He cares about the horses. So we see right away that personally, spiritually, as Love Inspired would have it, he and Char are the same. Even though we know that the whole book is going to be full of misunderstandings and the rocky road to romance. And not only does he want her to do her best to save all of these horses, but the one particular horse, Ginger, when he kneels over her where she's laying, his face changes. And Char is looking at his face when it changes. And she says, "You know this horse, and not just as a livestock animal." And she's absolutely right. There's a long history. There's a long story behind it that we get as the book goes on. But he decides, I don't care how bad this horse is. You're going to save her. We're going to save her. Char tries to tell him that might not be possible. She's pretty far gone. She's worse off than the others. But he doesn't care. And there's a really good scene. Everybody's all gathered around here, including young people. Love Inspired often have children as characters. And the two children here are the niece and nephew of Isaiah Woods, who at first, Char thinks they might be his daughter. The niece might be his daughter. He has to correct her. And I want to read you just a bit here so you get a sense of what Ruth Logan Hearn is doing here. Again, unless we're talking about a Harlequin romance from the 1950s, I'm just going to operate under the assumption that Sarah knows this author or has talked to her, interviewed her, or one kind or another. But she does a really good job. I want to read you just the bit about this, because this is not only a really good job of etching out the two characters, it's also a good job about Love Inspired. We'll get to that. She asks, is your daughter a strong person? And he corrects her and says, my niece, actually. And yes, she's quite strong. Why? Watching animals die is no picnic, and you and I both know this one's on shaky ground. Regardless, he still had to try. We'll do our best and leave the rest in God's hands. Doubt clouded her features. Whoever left the fate of these animals to God didn't give them much of a fighting chance, did they? He faced her, calm and cool, and made sure she understood exactly what he wanted to say. He brought them here, where they're surrounded by helping hands. I'd say he's done all right. She didn't argue with him, but her expression indicated she wasn't buying into his reasoning. There are two things that I want to point out about that. One is, unfortunately, a weakness of this author, who does a really good job throughout this book, but in this book, no one is ever calm without being collected. No one is ever cool without being collected. It's calm and collected. They are together. In this book, nothing is ever just first. It's first and foremost. That is lazy, and I don't know anything about. I don't think I've ever read anything by this author. I have no idea if this was her only book or her first book. But that is exactly the kind of thing that if you are not an author and you're just writing a note to someone, it's excusable that first and foremost or calm, cool, and collected or whatnot can be there. It's exactly that kind of thing that we must not forgive in the people who are authors selling their work for money. That's exactly the kind of thing, the beginning of what shouldn't be there. So that's one thing that I want to point out, and it bothered me. So it goes throughout the book like that. It's not distracting enough to ruin the experience, but I started to expect it. By page 100, I was predicting that I would see that it would occur, that it would never not happen. That's one thing, and that's negative. But the positive thing is also what you saw in that exchange, which is I want to allay your fears if you don't know anything about love-inspired romances, because you might think from my description that you're going to get beaten over the head with the religion aspect, and you aren't. That exchange there is exactly what it's like all throughout this book. It is, in other words, completely natural. Religious people do think like that, and people who are skeptical do question exactly along those lines. No one's intelligence is being insulted on either end, and that happens throughout the book. The author sort of won me over. The careful and compassionate writing about horses is really well done. I don't know if this author has experience or just did the research, but it's really well done. But she really won me over by frequent and rather knowing deployments of sections from the book of Isaiah. It's not just an accident that Isaiah Woods is named Isaiah. And another author, maybe an author who was maybe less scripturally literate, would maybe have mentioned that there's a book of Isaiah in the Bible, but there's more than that here. I'm giving the wrong impression. This is not a Bible thumping book at all. But the quotations from Isaiah, of course, she, like everybody else, like all of us, when we quote from Isaiah, we're quoting from the sane and great Isaiah, not the crazy Isaiah, because the book of Isaiah is right down the middle between the sane and wonderful, quotable Isaiah and the crazy Isaiah. She doesn't quote from the crazy Isaiah. She quotes from the sane and wonderful. The sane and wonderful part of the book of Isaiah is arguably widely considered to be the most beautiful thing in the Old Testament. So, and it's in here. It's throughout here. It is not making you open your hymnal. It's very organically done. And you know what's coming in a love-inspired, I would argue in any Harlequin category romance, you know what's coming. I would argue that is far from being a weakness, a strength of these things. It's that you know what you're getting. You can concentrate on how well it's being done. Much like my beloved baked potato. You know exactly what you're getting. There's only so much that a baked potato can do, but there's good baked potatoes and bad baked potatoes. You get to concentrate on that and then complain about it. But this is really well done, even though you know what's coming. Way down the line, you just have to. The fun is figuring out how these two will navigate. Not only they are very much alike in personality, and as you know from your own personal life, that's where the sparks fly. It's not the saying is opposites attract, but opposites also accommodate each other a lot better than people who are a lot alike. There are sparks between Isaiah and Char all throughout this book, and they are convincingly done. That's not the only thing. There's also that feud that runs throughout here. That is, the author brings in elements of racism towards First Nation people. That is also well handled. This is, in other words, a refreshingly good romance, a really good adult romance. Lots of hard edges. Not all these wonderful horses survive. There's a big animal vet out in Idaho is going to have hard truths to deal with. That's wonderful. And I think the fact that the author isn't making this a kind of, gilded Sunday school exercise underscores. It makes the religious elements all the more effective. It makes the faith elements feel more real. I don't know if any of that is making sense, but I really enjoyed it. So my chatting category romance is off to a fine start for the month. So we're just going to keep going. Sarah made a video recently where she mentioned upping her game on this channel, doing a couple videos a week. Anything she does, I will do. So it could be that you'll be getting more chatting category romances. And I don't have any illusions that, a 2019 love-inspired romance is readily available. So in my own videos, and you get this on Sarah's channel anyway, I'll also be talking about romance just in general. I mean, like I've been doing in this video, some of the things that are involved here and what you think of them. But the specific book, a thumbs up from Steve. So there you go. That's chatting category romance for this time around. I'll wrap this up. I will see you next time. Thank you, BookTube.